You're listening to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and it's time for this week's Long Island News, the show that talks to newsmakers and other important people from Nassau and Suffolk County that matter to Long Island and Long Islanders like you. So each week we'll have a conversation about issues that affect all of us. I live on Long Island just like you. I want to know more about the people making the big decisions that affect all of us. Well, this week, I thought it would be a good idea to check in on the pulse of politics and also to check in with the person who covers it all for Newsday and Newsday.com, Mr. Yancey Roy, Newsday's Albany Bureau Chief. Well, Yancey, welcome back.
Hey, good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's always good to talk to you, somebody who actually knows what's going on. So we got a lot to get to in about 30 minutes. Let's jump right in and start with the big picture and national politics with the upcoming election and the change at the top of the Democratic ticket now that Kamala Harris is the candidate taking on former President Donald Trump. Back when Biden announced he wasn't going to seek the re-election, you reported about pollsters saying that a new face in the presidential race could give Democrats a chance to bridge an enthusiasm gap with some of the party's key voter groups, women, African Americans, and young people, as well as swing voters. Well, that seems to have occurred. What's your latest on that?
Well, look, now the race is set. I guess we'll see going forward. But certainly in the immediacy of the announcement of Joe Biden saying he won't run again, I think that two things that you heard that day and the next day. One is that Democrats were upbeat because even if they supported Biden, they saw the numbers were not good. And in the words of Jay Jacobs, who's from Nassau County, he also happens to be the state Democratic chairman, there was a lack of excitement that was palpable among the rank and file. And that, there was these lingering questions about what would happen with the ticket, and moving on, making a decision and moving on certainly gave them a spark in the immediacy of the announcement. Now they have to unify and get out the vote and do all of that stuff. On the flip side, the Republicans, at least in the immediate reaction, was this is not good news because many of the down ballot folks had been thinking it would be good for them to run if Biden was at the top of the ticket because they were feeling the momentum. How much does that change with Harris for the Republican point of view? That's going to be played out now over a few months. Maybe they feel just as confident as they were, maybe not. But certainly the change was something that Democrats made upbeat. The Democrats had an upbeat reaction, and the Republicans viewed as not good news, at least in the immediate aftermath of the decision.
Yeah. Well, they were all geared and set to campaign against Biden, and now
right.
All those trinkets that say "Let's go, Brandon," they kind of have to go in the garbage. Just the attitude change, just talking to people in general, there seems to be a little bit of an upbeat, kind of like we pulled out the speed bump or something,
Well, look, it's also certainly unusual for the way we've come to view presidential elections, that's for sure, because you and I are both old enough to go way back in the day when primaries were sort of an advisory function to a committee selection about a presidential nominee, right? People weren't locked in to voting based on the primary, at least the delegates I'm talking about.
Right.
And choices still got made at a convention. And starting in the 70s, more and more primaries until we got to where we are now, which is not only does all of the delegate selection ride on primaries, it occurs over a long period and people are running for years. I mean, right. Trump basically never stopped running for president. And in a way, the sort of new face and the sort of 100-day sprint that we've got or so now to the election day is a little bit different. It's not exactly like it was way back in the day because it's only one party making the switch and it's going with a new candidate. But it's a little different than this, what had become accustomed to is 2, 3, 4 year campaign for one election day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely different. Yeah. In any event, now closer to home here in New York, you reported this week that judges on New York's top court voiced skepticism about a Republican lawsuit claiming the state's new law allowing early voting by mail is unconstitutional. Can you tell us what's going on with that?
Sure. So a couple of years ago, the state legislature, well, actually it was last year, passed a law that would change the restrictions on voting. For years, New York had was kind of behind the curve in the sense of we had in-person voting and we had absentee voting. And to get an absentee ballot, you had to sign a piece of paper that said, I can't make it to the polls because I'm ill. I have to be out of town on election day. I can't make it. You have to sign a statement and then you get your absentee ballot. Many other states, especially out west, had kind of moved to mail-in voting years before us. And so New York was kind of behind the curve in that sense. So to back up even further, there was a proposed constitutional amendment a couple of years prior that would have allowed early mail-in voting. It was defeated at the polls, and that the Democrats-led legislature came back after that. They looked at the law. They think that they can pass a law, a state statute, as opposed to a constitutional amendment that would allow early mail-in voting. Anyone who's qualified could ask for an early ballot and get it. Republicans generally have been opposed to early mail-in voting, especially in New York. The Republican State Committee and a whole slew of Republican congressional members filed a lawsuit to try to get the courts to declare that early mail-in voting was unconstitutional in New York, that the only permissible way to vote is in person or absentee. That's a lawsuit that's now winding its way through the courts. It's important to note that the Republican lawsuit has lost at both the lower level court and the mid-level court. This week, they got their appeal heard by New York's top court, which will give the final decision probably in August, they will give a decision as to where that lawsuit stands. Now, in terms of voicing skepticism, one thing listeners might want to know is that anytime a lawsuit gets to New York's top court is this. The judges, 7 judges on the panel, basically, in a general sense, see their role as trying to poke holes in an argument, whether it's left, right, police versus a defendant, DAs versus a defendant, whatever. Part of their role is to fire off a series of questions at the lawyers on one side or another and say, how can you defend this? Isn't your argument flawed by X, Y, and Z? So that's part of their role, is to try to put the attorneys on their heels for whichever side they're trying to defend. That said, they did seem to voice a little bit of more skepticism at the Republican claim that the early mail-in voting is unconstitutional. It's interesting how it proceeds. You go from everything to grand arguments of how we used to vote hundreds of years ago versus now, and isn't there a difference in how the law views those? They had little arguments over what does the word "at" mean. Republicans saying that the word "at" the election means a physical place, and that you have to, that conveys some sort of physical presence at the polls. Whereas the judges were saying, well, how do we know that for sure? At can mean a general thing. At the election can mean the whole statewide election. Right. It's more of a temporal kind of modifier than one physical place. Anyway, it certainly was interesting legal arguments over the back and forth, and I think we'll get a decision in a few weeks because the court knows it needs to render a decision well in advance of Election Day. Right.
And the court's also aware that it hasn't succeeded in, 3 previous courts before it?
2.
Okay, yeah. 2. Are they allowed or?
Oh, yeah, you can overturn it. Overturning is less likely to happen than affirming a decision. And I mean that in a general sense, whether it's a a lawsuit about early voting, or it's a criminal conviction, or a personal injury lawsuit.
Right.
If it is generally speaking harder to overturn, especially a mid-level court decision,
Right.
than it is to just get the Court of Appeals to affirm it.
But in this case, the two courts before them are saying that they feel it is constitutional.
It is constitutional, right?
So, okay.
The two courts below sided with the Democratic argument.
Right.
They rejected the Republican claim. They said that early mail-in voting is, and the law as it's written, is legal.
Right. Now, as I always talk about optics, and as a voter and just a guy who picks up the newspaper, and reads stories, the optics, it just seems that Republicans really don't want people to vote, because traditionally when more people vote, more Republicans lose. The message to me is, well, start giving us something that we would like to vote for, and maybe those circumstances will change. Is that the wrong picture? Am I incorrect?
Well, I'll just say this: when it comes to vote by mail, which has been, like I said, it's been on the rise. It started with Western states using it a lot more. They feel like it's better turnout and more participation. And then we had voting through the pandemic in 2020. I'll say this, that in general, Republicans have at times sought to limit vote by mail, and Democrats have sought to very much encourage it. So, and I think it doesn't take much to see that there's a sort of raw political angle there. Democrats feel the more people who vote and participate, it's better for them. Republicans have been pushing for voting in person because they feel like it's better for them.
Right. Just a reminder, you're listening to this week's Long Island News on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and today we're talking to Yancey Roy, Newsday and Newsday.com's Albany Bureau Chief. Now, another controversial issue affecting local ballots that you reported on concerns the four-member New York State Board of Elections approving wording for a proposed constitutional amendment on the ballot that uses the phrase reproductive and healthcare autonomy instead of abortion rights. Can you go into a little bit more?
This is another interesting one that involves a lot of inside baseball, but it's important for the public and for the voting and how this turns out. Mm-hmm. To back up for a second, the Democratic-led state legislature a couple of years ago sought, after the overturn of Roe v. Wade rights at the Supreme Court, sought to enshrine abortion rights into the New York State Constitution and sought to propose an amendment to do so. They ended up adopting an amendment that wasn't just about abortion rights, but it also included things about LGBT rights as well. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit broader than that, and they dubbed it the Equal Rights Amendment. And they said it was, look at Roe v. Wade, what happened there? We need to put this in our state constitution. Republicans on the other side said, first of all, New York already has a state law that's very strong that protects abortion rights. It's not going anywhere in New York. And then they also say that the broader amendment addressing gender issues raises all sorts of issues for them, such as would it give a constitutional right to do such things as a transgender woman participating in female sports competitions? But there's also, again, a political turnout issue here for either side. Democrats are hoping that a proposed constitutional amendment that touches on abortion helps drive their voters to the polls. And Republicans also seeing that as a possibility, would rather not have that also be an election issue.
Right.
What happens is the Board of Elections, which is 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, have to agree on the wording of the amendment that goes before the public. And because it's 2 and 2, there's a lot of compromise involved. And the Republicans, although some Democrats wanted to change the language to specifically say abortion, the Republicans said, no, we're going to go with the language that's in the state statute, which says reproductive autonomy. Democrats say, well, wait a minute, there's a difference between what kind of legal terms have to be in a statute and how do we easily explain this to the public so that they can understand what this is about. in the end, the Republicans, again, wouldn't budge. So the phrase in the amendment as it looks right now is reproductive and healthcare autonomy. Some groups say they might sue over this because New York does have a statute, a state law that says any proposed amendment has to be in plain language, written at an 8th grade level, so that anyone can understand. They can walk in and look at the ballot and say, oh, this is what this is about. And that the phrases that are used right now in the proposed amendment are written at a college level, and it's just unacceptable. We'll see if anyone actually sues. Because right now, if no one sues and wins in court, the way the ballot is going to read is going to say things such as reproductive and healthcare autonomy.
Right, right. Well, we always talk about abortion, but accompanying that is a lot of healthcare issues that we don't include. The other thing I think the American people probably are, certainly the ones screaming their heads off, most abortions are done chemically. They're done with a pill. I mean, they have these visions of them splitting women open and stealing babies and that kind of thing. And that's, ludicrous. Definitely on this level, a little more education. And I think right across the board, it would quell a lot of the bickering when people really realized what it was they were talking about, not what they think they're talking about. In any event.
Well, it's interesting when there's been other states have had state amendments about abortion rights. Generally, they've been supported, even in conservative states. Right. But again, folks will say that New York already has a law, and it's pretty strong law, and that the extra amendment is not needed. But again, you can't divorce this also from turnout politics. I mean, governor's office is not up for election right now, but 27 congressional seats are up for election in New York. 213 state legislative seats are up for election in New York. And both parties are not only looking at this abortion amendment through the lens of what the amendment does, but also will it have any effect on turnout for any of those races?
Right. Well, you're scratching on my next question here. And again, we briefly touch on local races in November. Long Island congressional seats are up for grabs. And you reported that challenger Laura Gillen has more money in her campaign account than Republican Anthony D'Esposito. And that's thanks to a large early investment by the national Democrats in a bid to flip that congressional seat. What's your take on that election, as well as the seat that Tom Suozzi won back in February that he needs to win again?
Long Island has 4 seats. Right now, 3 of them held by Republicans and 1 by a Democrat. That's Tom Suozzi. Long Island has always been viewed nationally as somewhat purple. They can switch between red and blue, and all of those districts have at least changed over the years. Under the current configurations of enrollment by district and whatever, I guess you'd look at it this way. Look, District 4, which is the Nassau-based seat held by Anthony D'Esposito, being challenged by Laura Gillen. Right. I think Republicans or Democrats would put that at the top of the list of the 4 as those considered in the toss-up range. Let's put it that way. Cook Political Report, the nonpartisan analyst, kind of puts it in the sort of the toss-up range as well, leaning probably Republican. So I think that race is going to draw the most national attention and national money. And I think that we saw that early with the Democrats giving to Laura Gillen to give her a bump in the midsummer to kind of try to get her campaign some momentum. I think that both Democrats and Republicans will drive money to Gillen and D'Esposito as we go down the stretch. The fact that Gillen had more money as of July, which is a sort of reporting interval that people look at, is important and notable, but it's certainly also not definitive. And then look at the other races. I think that certainly Suozzi is an incumbent, and he is viewed as the favorite of holding on to his seat, which is the Nassau 3rd, based in Nassau, although it runs along the North Shore, includes parts of Queens, et cetera. Yeah. Nick LaLota, a Republican from Suffolk County, which generally includes some of the North Shore there and the East End there. it would be considered a favorite to win re-election, but not a lock. He's facing Democrat John Avlon, and I think Avlon will get a lot of attention from national Democrats as well. The other seat is Andrew Garbarino, is a Republican, South Shore, Suffolk County-based district. He, of the four, he's probably considered the safest incumbent going into November, with the caveat being the presidential election will probably be one of the biggest factors on any of these congressional seats, whether it's on Long Island or some of the contested seats in the Hudson Valley.
Right. So depending on how nationally things go,
it can have a huge coattail effect, and can kind of cut either way. People might vote one party ticket all the way down. Some people might vote for one party for president, but want to keep their congressman or flip their congressman on the other side.
Now, there's also a race, the Senate seat, Kirsten Gillibrand. I interviewed somebody the other day who was running for that seat on the LaRouche party ticket. I hadn't heard that name in years, and she resurrected it, I guess, to run. But you know anything about that? The latest on the Gillibrand?
Well, I mean, Kirsten Gillibrand, the Democrat, is running for re-election. Mike Sapercone is the Republican candidate. And as of the July reporting period, Gillibrand, no surprise, had much, much more money on hand than Mike Sapercone. I think her chances for re-election are by nonpartisan places are considered pretty good. But, we'll see. The Democrats have held all of the U.S. Senate seats here in New York since 1998. And there hasn't been a close election for U.S. Senate in a while for any of the New York seats.
Right. Yeah, it's, the whole thing is interesting. And my whole life, I wasn't always like into politics and things like that, but I've never seen like this kind of landscape or this atmosphere that, I interviewed I think it was a Republican candidate a little while ago. And, again, optics, the way just looking at things. And I said, I get this impression that Republicans really, obviously, they're not afraid of Democrats. But I think Republicans are afraid of other Republicans, and why there is a reticence to come out and, declare a thing, anything. Because once you declare something, you've taken a side. And it's just so, and you can get eaten by your own party.
In general, I think it's no secret. We're not breaking any news to say we're in a very polarized time. And
Gotcha.
The divide between folks who either see just regular people on the left and right who see themselves a little left or a little right is more rancorous and polarizing than it's been in a long, long time. Political scientist types and sociologist types have written books in the last decade about this and about how there seems to be more, and I'm really generalizing here, and it's not for it doesn't apply to everyone, but there's a lot of be on our team, stick with our team, do this. There's less middle ground.
Right. Well, to get on something else, Kathy Hochul has been juggling this congestion pricing thing. How is that? I mean, she's got to be being hammered from one side or the other because of her decisions on this.
Well, yeah, and right now most of the criticism is coming from either the left politically or people who want to see congestion pricing for a variety of reasons. This could be transit advocates who think it's a great idea because they want to encourage more mass transit and less driving. From environmentalists who see the toll of too much driving into the city. From union people who see see that the switch to congestion pricing, there's an opportunity for jobs there as it gets implemented and what have you. But I think it's no secret, again, that this was a consideration about taking it off the table, at least for this election cycle, because it might have an impact on regional elections, especially congressional elections in the Long Island and the Hudson Valley. And the idea from the Democratic side was to try to take it off the table. And to that extent, just through that lens, that viewpoint, it's probably worked because campaigns are not talking much about congestion pricing. Right now, it's the advocates who wanted it, who are disappointed that it's off the table and say it might have an impact on repair projects and everything going forward. But in terms of like the election politics, it's kind of off the table for right now.
Yeah, right. Well, we got a few seconds left. I don't know. Is there anything you think we should know that you've been keeping your eye on,
Well, look, we're going to go forward. We're in August now. Traditionally, after Labor Day is when everything, election-wise, campaign-wise, really kicks into gear. August is sort of a staging period for folks. I know we have the Democratic convention coming up, but going forward, there's going to be a lot of interesting elections on Long Island. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, not only with the 4 congressional seats, but you've got a slew of 9 Senate seats. You've got 22 Assembly seats. Not all of those are going to be, quote unquote, in play, but certainly a handful or more are going to be in play going forward, whether it's in the state Senate or the state Assembly. Some interesting races shaping up. And at one point we talked about money and contributions. It's going to be interesting to see past Labor Day as we get into September and close to October. There'll be campaign finance reports that become available, and you'll be able to see where the parties are putting money in those congressional races, in those state Senate races, and in those Assembly races.
Right. You hear that, folks? You can look that up.
Or read Newsday.
There you go. Oh, boy. Well, I have to thank you for spending so much time with us. I know you're busy, and I was going to ask you, you're in Albany. Is that your
correct?
Is that your primary?
Yeah, I've been the Albany Bureau Chief for some time now. So, we're stationed in Albany.
Okay.
We have a 3-person bureau here, and we're all stationed in Albany.
Okay. Well, I hope is it as hot for you as it is for us? I think
it sure is.
We're pushing on 95 or something today. Anyway, thank you very much. I want to thank you. And definitely we'll talk to you soon. There's going to be a lot of action coming. So we'll check with you to see what's going on.
Anytime, Bill.
Thank you. My guest today has been Yancey Roy, Newsday and Newsday.com's Albany Bureau Chief. And we thank him all the time for coming on and enlightening us. When you're in the middle of the fray, you see more, and especially when you're as observant as he is. But the clock on the wall says it's time for this week's Long Island News to get on out of here. I'm Bill McIntyre. Remember, you can listen to us by searching for this week's Long Island News wherever you listen to podcasts. And we're right here every Friday at 3 p.m. on the radio, on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.